Welcome to the Riverbend Awareness Project.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast episode are solely those of the individuals participating and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Riverbend Media Group or the Riverbend Awareness Project, its affiliates, or its employees. It is important to note that the discussion presented is for informational purposes only and should not be construed as medical advice. Listeners are encouraged to consult with qualified healthcare professionals for any medical concerns or decisions. The Riverbend Awareness Project is a product of Riverbend Media Group.
That's awesome that there are so many volunteer opportunities. I was thinking, as we're talking about this, I love going outside, but sadly I don't get to do it that often because I don't know, having a job, it's hard sometimes. It feels like I have to really plan ahead and find a way to get out and enjoy the outdoors more. So do you have any tips for how people can incorporate getting outside more into their lives, especially when they have a really busy schedule?
Yes, and so a little personal and peek behind the curtain background. We're a smaller organization. I am the only person on staff currently, and that means that I have to wear every single hat. I'm constantly doing 10 different things every day, and it can feel overwhelming and busy. And every single time I start to feel overwhelmed, just stepping outside, getting in sunlight, it's become a little bit rote and cliche to say, like, go touch grass when you're just a little too much, but it's true. Just getting outside, even if it's for 5 minutes. I worked at this great company a few years ago that they would call them building walks, and it was just, hey everybody, we're just going to go walk around the building. And we have this thing in our culture. We believe we have to be productive for every minute of every day, but a 5-minute walk just outside around the building, even if you're not in a park, even if you're not in nature, you're just getting out, getting in the fresh air, getting in the sunlight. Studies have shown it can affect your mood. It can boost your happiness chemicals. It can really make a huge difference, and not just to how you feel, but I'm talking to the employers now too, to your productivity. So if you've got employees that tend to start to kind of, their energy winds down in the afternoon, encourage them to get out and go for a walk, especially, if they're more social, grab a buddy and say, hey, let's go walk around the building. It's such a tremendous boost to how you feel and how productive you can be when you get back into your seat again, even if it's just for 5 minutes.
Is there anything else anyone wanted to say before I jump on to the next question? No? Okay. Checking. I feel bad. We kind of roped Tyson in last minute too. We were like, hey, do you want to join the episode so you can experience it? And he's doing a great job. But I just was like, you can talk if you feel like it. If not, that's okay too. But another, I guess, deterrent, sorry, right word, that some people might see is maybe cost. Like, oh, well, I can't go camping because I don't have all this gear, or I don't have the PTO to take a long weekend trip, to a national park. What are some maybe more cost-efficient ways that people can still get outdoors?
Well, I'll speak to what I know. Again, living here in the Treasure Valley, I think almost everyone that lives here is within a 10-minute drive of some kind of park or greenbelt or trail or something that they could go on. And if you don't have a car, you're usually about a 10-minute walk away. And it really just all goes back to what I was talking about, how the gift of these public lands is that freedom and that spirit of exploration. It doesn't cost anything to walk outside and just start exploring. You don't have to have equipment. I mean, yes, if you want to go camping, it's nice to have a tent and a sleeping bag, but you don't have to have equipment to go out and start exploring these trails. You don't have to have equipment to go out and just go skip rocks down at the lake, go, explore some of the rivers, explore the greenbelt, explore these parks. I think that, again, it's that cultural ideal that, oh, we need to have all this gear, we need to have all these things. We really don't. We can just walk outside, just throw on shoes and a hat, and just start exploring. And that's when I say the Western United States, like that's what I'm talking about, is that Western sense of adventure, that Western sense of exploration. And the folks who really take advantage of and explore these areas, they really understand that, and they find their way into working for whether it's the Forest Service or whether it's an organization like mine where we're really focused on the outdoors. I think I think you just have to kind of it's going to sound cliche, but you just have to step outside and just go explore.
Thank you. We were talking earlier about volunteer opportunities. Do you have any advice for if you'd like to go out and find a group in the community or maybe a program or some way to get involved? Where's a good place to start with that?
That's a great question. There are a lot of organizations. I would say if your community has a green belt, there's always going to be lots of activities happening around the green belt. But Parks and Recreation there's national parks and rec, there's statewide parks and rec, and then there's city and county levels. So go visit your local parks department and see what do they have going on. You can look up different groups that have outdoors in the name, or you can just kind of Google, hey, volunteer opportunities here in my city. But if you start at the city level, the city is always looking for volunteers. And if they don't have something, they'll point you to a group who is also looking for volunteers. So, it's once you start looking, you'll be surprised how many notifications and flyers and stuff that you didn't even think was there before, you'll start to see. And then you can really specialize. So if you're someone who really likes working with animals, or if you are someone who really likes to fish or really likes to hike, there's ways to specialize your volunteer work to focus more on your area of interest. It doesn't always just have to be, it's not one size fit all. There's lots of different niches. And then the more you start working with a group, the more opportunities you'll start to discover through working with them and the other groups they work with.
I hadn't thought about Parks and Rec, but that makes sense. There was last summer, my church group, it's not the outdoors, but they had us paint some, like the back wall at one of the baseball fields, and they had, another time they had like the bleachers at the park. So there's definitely opportunities out there for sure.
There's tons of opportunities. And if there's one thing that parks and city departments are always looking for, it's bodies to help them with those work. We did a great volunteer activity down in Twin Falls. We had, I think, 200 folks show up from one of our business organizations, and they spent the whole day out there. And some of it was, painting over graffiti that were under the bridges, and some of it was helping clear dead brush and just clear the trails. But, the whole day was just being outside, and they were working, but there's just ways to get outside, and it could be something as simple as you show up to help paint, a wall, an outdoor space, or it could be as complicated as you're going up into the trails and you're helping with clearing brush. There's so many opportunities out there. And I think that to folks like me who work in this space, we forget that sometimes you have to point folks in the direction of just starting somewhere. And it can be as simple as just going to your local, city parks department and just asking, hey, what are some volunteer opportunities that are available? And you'll start to find more and more groups the more you dig into it.
Nice. This is kind of a different question, a little bit. You mentioned like screens and how we get too much into them. Is there, in your opinion, can there be ways that technology can help with the outdoors, like our experience, or is there like how can it help and hinder kind of the outdoor experience?
So first of all, technology is not going out anywhere. And, I might harp on screens for what they do, but there's a way that you can incorporate the screen, and especially for kids too, where it can be fun. One of my favorite apps, it's called iNaturalist, exactly what it sounds like just the I and then Naturalist. And it's an app that lets you take a picture of whether it's an interesting flower that you saw, or a bug, or a little critter, and it will tell you what that organism is. And you're doing a great service by using that app, because when you take that picture and when you identify what you think it is, that data gets uploaded to their database, and it helps them figure out, okay, which plants have spread to which areas. It'll even tell you if that plant or that animal is native to the state that you're in, or if it's an invasive species. And it's just a fun way to just learn a little bit more about the plants and animals that are all around us. It's great when we're doing our volunteer activities, because I tell folks to use it to try to figure out, is that a weed that you're pulling? Is that an invasive species, or is it something that's meant to be here? But yeah, you can always, and then of course, if you're looking for a great backdrop for any kind of photo videos, you can do a lot worse than being outdoors. So take your phone, take a picture. If you're an artist, and maybe you don't have time to sit for 4 hours and paint a picture, but go out and take some pictures for inspiration. Take some videos, just get out and walk in nature and bring your phone with you, and let that phone be a way for you to experience that nature and that environment while using technology.
That is so cool. All right, this question is just kind of for fun. Let's say you're out hiking on one of your favorite trails. Which would you rather come across? A bear, a bison, or a moose?
Bison.
Bison. All right, tell me more.
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't expect that answer to be so quick. Yeah, bison.
Why?
I think that I'm weirdly less afraid of the bison than the bear or the moose. I've heard too many stories. My boyfriend is from Alaska, and he talks about moose being super dangerous and super big. And my grandparents lived in the mountains, and they had to deal with bears coming in their backyard, and bears can be troublesome and also very scary. And bison, I don't know why. I think I just, yeah. I think it would be cool to see a bison.
Just slowly back away.
Yeah, I feel like they're less likely to charge me than a bear or a moose.
That's what I think. And bears are more likely to eat you, probably. I don't think a bison's going to see you as food. They could be very aggressive.
No.
Like, don't get me wrong. But
sure.
Yeah, any animal can be aggressive. I thought you were going to ask me something about like a spider or a snake. I actually just encountered, we did an event at one of our state parks a few weeks ago, and this kid found a snake. And I'd always heard about bull snakes and just assumed that they were venomous, and got to find out they're not venomous. They're actually great to have around. They eat all the mice, but they still will bite you if they feel threatened. So, yeah, if the choice were like snake, spider, or rodent, snake would be last on my list in terms of what I want to encounter. That's definitely a fear for mine.
I agree with you. You, me, and
Senior.
Indiana Jones. No.
Yeah.
No to the snakes.
I blame growing up in the 80s and 90s for my fear of snakes, because if Indy hated snakes, I was going to hate snakes too.
How about you, Tyson?
Well, I was going to ask, to narrow it down, since we have the possibility of seeing so many bears or moose, at least around, southeast Idaho and more towards the greater Yellowstone, would you be more afraid to see a moose or a bear on the trail?
Ooh,
I know that's a hard one.
that is a hard one. I think I'd be more afraid of the bear, but I have had more personal experience with running across bears than moose. I've only seen a moose in the wild once, and that was hundreds of yards away, so I didn't have to worry about it. But yeah, I think on a gut level, I'd probably be a little bit more afraid of a bear. Although I do know from the experiences I've had with bears that if you're far enough away that you can just kind of quietly get out of range, that's probably your best option. Most of them, if you have to get them out of the area, it's just like anything else where you just kind of become big and loud. And I have this core memory of my grandfather, chasing a bear off the porch and raising his arms overhead, "Get out of here, you big bear." And I always thought that was a funny thing to say to the bear, because you're telling the bear he's big and that he could probably get you. But the bear, bear ran off. He was scared.
The bear didn't understand
I guess
English.
It worked. we made that point to him. I think it was my dad that said, you could have shouted anything at that bear. You could have shouted, "Come on in, you're welcome to my food." But as long as you shout it in a aggressive tone, then then I think you'll be okay. But I've never heard of anyone shouting down a moose. So yeah. So I guess I'd be scared of the bear, but I feel like I know how to deal with the bear. So maybe the moose. Now that I think about it. I don't know.
Oh, sorry. This kind of brought up a question we had, and then we were like, maybe we shouldn't, but I'm gonna ask it now. Because I don't want to end on like, oh, it's scary out there. If people are kind of nervous, or maybe not nervous, just what should they, I guess, kind of be aware of? Like when they go outside, they might encounter animals, they may encounter bugs, they might encounter plants that are poisonous. Maybe what's like the good kind of perspective to have that might happen, and what to do kind of if it does.
Oh goodness, you're going to tap into my
Sorry.
medical background and all that fun stuff. So, first and foremost, if you're going for more than just a walk around the block or a trip to the park, bring water, wear a hat, put on sunscreen, just protect your body and bring something to help you stay hydrated. As far as encountering wildlife, the maxim I always grew up with was they're more scared of you than you are of it. And in addition to that, kind of something that we all need to remind ourselves of is they just want to be left alone. And so as long as you're leaving them alone and letting them do their thing, they should leave you alone and let you do your thing. It's really, you start to see problems when humans start inserting themselves into the natural environment of those animals, and then the animal is going to say, hey, you shouldn't be here. And if the human's not picking up the hint, the animal will let them know in no uncertain terms. But yeah, I think as far as just normal outdoor safety, I always go back to, water, snacks, make sure you're covered from the sun, whether it's sunscreen, a hat, or both. And there's a great campaign during the 2020, 2021 kind of rise in outdoor activities that we saw, with everybody being, on lockdown at home, nothing to do. And the campaign was called Recreate Responsibly. And I think that's just such a great phrase that encapsulates everything. So what Recreate Responsibly means is just kind of know your levels. If you haven't really done much hiking before, you probably shouldn't be doing a 12-mile hike with 1,000-foot elevation. You kind of know where your starting point is, what your level is. Certainly, it adds more strain on those park resources when the park ranger has to go out and find a lost hiker. It's time and energy. So know where you're going, know what your level is, and make sure you're bringing water and some way to protect yourself from the sun and from the elements. Wear layers.
Perfect. Thank you. That's awesome.
And thank you so much for everything that you shared with us today. We really appreciate you joining us on the podcast.
Absolutely. No, I can talk all day about being outdoors and public lands. And like I said, it's one of those things that folks don't really think about until they start thinking about it. And then, boy, you'll start researching more and more and learning more about it. And Idaho is a really cool state for a lot of reasons, but I think really high up on that list is just the fact that we have so many ways that we can get outside and have fun. And yeah, it's what makes Idaho, Idaho.
Is there anything else that we didn't cover that you were like, oh, I wanted to talk about this and they didn't ask me about it?
No, I read through the questions and thought, okay, I think I know the answers to all those. And then of course my brain goes blank every time you hit record. But no, I just, shout out, it's not just my organization. There's a lot of organizations who are fighting the same fight I am. And when going back to that question of how do you support the work that we do, you're doing it right now. If you're listening to this podcast, if you're learning about public lands and the outdoors, and you're doing it every time you step outside and be in nature and appreciate and utilize these outdoor spaces that we have, you're supporting our work and what we do, because you are who we work for. We work for folks who enjoy the outdoors and who benefit from the outdoors, whether you get outside every day or not. We're out there trying to keep these spaces the way they are so that you can keep enjoying them.
Thank you for doing that and for your passion about it.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I had a quick question before we log off as well. You said behind the curtains, you are currently the only person running the organization right now, right?
Yes, so we have one paid staff member, and that's me. And then I have a board of 14 members who I report to. So it's not just me, but in terms of day-to-day operations, it's pretty much just me.
Okay. And then, so that my question is, did you start the organization?
No, I've actually only been in this position for a little over a year. We started in 2017, so we're not one of the newest SOBEN organizations. There's some organizations that haven't even fully coalesced yet. They're just kind of starting to get things together, and then there's some that have been around for 20, 25 years. So we're kind of right in the middle of the pack. But when I say small, I mean small in terms of staff size. You know, we are a statewide organization. I've got members from all over the state, and just like any organization, we are focused on our work, but we're also focused on growing. So if anyone wants to learn more about what we do, it's idahobusinessfortheoutdoors.org, or Idaho BO, which I know sounds weird because I'm saying BO, but idahobo.org is the shorter version.
Awesome. Thank you for filling in that gap. And then that kind of brings me to my final question. And I was just wondering, what inspired you to take this position and want to be this, in part of an organization that roots for Idaho's public land?
Oh, well, when I came to Idaho right out of college, I was really young, and I was only supposed to be here for a couple of years before moving on, but I fell in love with Idaho. And when you fall in love with Idaho, I do think you fall in love with Idaho's outdoors. I don't think you can separate the two. And that was over 20 years ago. Why I wanted to work for this organization is I got to a point in my career. I've done content and writing and marketing and all different things, and I really got to a point where I wanted my work to matter. I didn't want my 8 hours every day to just go towards increasing the bottom line for a bunch of shareholders. And getting into the nonprofit space and getting into an organization like Idaho Business for the Outdoors means that I can kind of wake up every day and knowing like, okay, at least there's one person who's out here focused on it. And I'm not saying I'm the only person, but yeah, I wanted to be more involved. And again, going back to that, how do folks get involved? You just start reaching out to organizations like mine, start asking how you can help. And someday you might even find yourself working in an organization like mine.
Excellent. Thank you for such a great answer. I appreciate that.
Well, thank you. I don't know if it was great, but it's the answer.
Please remember to subscribe, rate, and share the Riverbend Awareness Project.
Thanks for listening, guys.